All right, session 3. So this is about self-administered surveys. Again, very short session because I'm just going to explain the pros and cons of self-administered surveys. Here we go. So when a person fills in the survey by themselves without any proctoring, really, what do you think are the benefits of that versus the downsides? So the most common advantages of having self-administered surveys is the fact that it's a reduced cost. You don't have to pay a researcher to actually administer the surveys for you, so it's pretty cheap. It's also self-paced, which is really good for respondents because they can take their time to complete the survey, which is of course something they can also do with an online survey. But think of, for example, a mail survey where you would mail a questionnaire out to people. They can just fill it in at a time that is convenient for them. And then since there is no person there, there's also no interview evaluation. People will not feel apprehensive about what they answer simply because they're not facing an interviewer or a researcher while they're answering the questions. Now, there's a good amount of downsides for sure with this type of research method, simply because it's very outdated. And everything, basically, you get the same benefits with online surveys, so why do self-administered surveys? The main downside is that respondents have full control over the survey. Again, think of, for example, mail surveys. If you get a mail survey in the mail from, let's say, a hospital visit when you just went to the doctor and they ask for your feedback on how the experience was, very few people really want to fill it in. Also, when they fill it in, they can skip questions, they can just let it linger and revisit it weeks after the doctor's visit, which is really no longer relevant at that point because they may not remember their full experience anymore. So honestly, the respondent has full control over the survey. They may not turn it in at all, actually. There's a lack of monitoring on the researcher's end. A researcher cannot provide any help if people don't understand the question. So if a question is not formulated clearly, respondents may misinterpret it, and that's not something a researcher can actually correct. Whereas with a face-to-face interview or a face-to-face survey, at least you have the benefit of being able to adjust your questions if a person doesn't understand it. And then by consequence, since there's such a lack of monitoring, the questionnaire requirements are set very high. What I mean by that is that all pressure is suddenly on the questionnaire to be completely self-explanatory. The wording must be perfect, clear, and not confusing because respondents only have that questionnaire and no additional guidance or instructions on how to complete it. So it must be very clear. So that means more upfront work on the researcher's end to actually craft a really good questionnaire. There's several types of self-administered surveys. Think of, for example, a drop-off survey where a researcher would drop off a survey which respondents can fill in on their own time and then pick it up later, but that is pretty outdated. What is still commonly used is a mail survey, even though it's also pretty outdated, but those are surveys that are still used by certain organizations. That's really a survey that gets mailed out and returned by mail. Usually there's no postage necessary, so they give you an envelope, preset, pre-typed, everything to make it as convenient as possible for the respondent. Now, the two main problems with these mail surveys are, you can probably already guess, non-response and self-selection bias. Non-response being people don't want to participate, they just don't fill in the survey at all. And the ones who do fill it in, there's some sort of selection bias. So people who do fill it in are usually people who have a lot of time, people who either had a really positive or a really negative experience and want to voice their experience or give that feedback. So you get a self-selection bias where you don't actually have a representative sample of your respondents, your target population. So in that case, it could lead to misleading results.